On one peaceful day, when everyone was finding their own way and had no worry about anything else, they suddenly appeared. The beautiful blue sky turned into a glimpse of darkness filled with an army of dragons. Everybody was helpless against the attacks of the dragons. This was the beginning of a war that lasted for more than 13 years. Humans continued to die against the powerful dragons, but there was one man who refused to back down. The eldest son of the renowned swordsman family, Duke Arden's family. He was the best talent on the entire western continent, and the last hero of the Hydern Empire. He slayed the dragons again and again, and he began to be known as the Dragon Slayer. Dragon Slayer fought with the Dragon King Drakasith, and he was losing the battle because the Dragon King grabbed him in his hands and his mouth was bleeding blood. The Dragon King didn't waste any time and furiously attacked the hero. When he was dying, Ethan suddenly began to remember his father, who put his faith in him to fulfill his duty, but now Ethan realized he had failed in those tasks because now he was dying helpless. He remembered the promise he made during his sister's funeral that he would kick out dragons from the continent, but it was not going to happen. Suddenly, a voice interrupted him and tried to call him, and Ethan woke up. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the least expected. His sister. She was sitting beside his bed, and she was happy to see her brother. Ethan couldn't believe how it was possible because he completely remembers her funeral and how everything folded after that. But now she was in front of him and it meant only one thing. Ethan might be dead, he thought to himself. Ethan also noticed that his sister was not wearing her luxurious clothes but simple clothes. But that was the least of his worries. In fact, he was at peace seeing his sister again. His sister asked him not to do anything dangerous just for her sake. He had a lot of questions for his sister, but instead she went away to bring soup for him and asked him not to move. But Ethan was curious. He began to analyze everything around him, and he realized he was under the treatment of a coma patient. He felt weak, like the mana inside of him had vanished somewhere, but he couldn't just lay down there, he had to wake up. Ethan grabbed the things around him and absorbed all the mana, and suddenly he felt the surge inside of him again, and he was once again stronger and got enough strength to stand up on his feet. He began to stretch his arms, and suddenly his sister entered the room, and she panicked seeing her brother on his feet. She rushed and tried to make him understand that, according to the doctor, it would take at least half a year more for him to walk again. Ethan was shocked after hearing the number. He asked his sister how long he had been in a coma, and she answered 10 years. The number was huge, and before Ethan could have asked another question, his sister made him lie on the bed again. Ethan asked her how the afterlife works because he believed he was already dead and that's why he was seeing his sister. But his sister made him realize he was wrong. She couldn't believe why her brother was acting so strange. She told him that he was perfectly fine and not dead, and neither were she nor others. Ethan refused to believe it because he perfectly remembered her funeral and was too killed by the dragons, but his being alive was suddenly shocking. He asked his sister how old she and he were. She answered that she is 20 and Ethan is 19. It was another shocker for Ethan, as he remembered that he was 19 when the dragon appeared the first time, and this made him ask another important question about the current state of the war. His sister explained that their family suffered hugely from the war, and finally they made a pact with the dragons. Ethan remembered no such pacts or any other things. There was no explanation for his situation except the fact that he might have regressed in the past. Ethan tried to calm himself and asked his sister where are all the servants of their family. She told him that there were none because their family was not rich anymore, and then Ethan realized that he had regressed his family. Western continent had 7 nations and the smallest of them was the Hydern Empire, but Duke Arden's family was known all over the continent for their great sword fighting, and this is why they were pretty rich and never lived in a bad place, but now their luxurious life was gone and Ethan learned this. Ethan was shocked to learn that his family was living in the small house for last 10 years. It was completely different from what he remembered, and now he was back in his younger body, but the situation was completely different. A question came in his mind and he asked his sister. He asked if their family has contributed so much, why hasn't the king helped them? His sister corrected him by revealing King did help them. The current King Zygmunt had recognized Ethan as the heir of Arden family and granted him the immunity of all the crimes except the treason, and the immunity will last 3 generations. Ethan realized how big of a powerful this immunity was, as he will be pardoned for even massacre if situation arises, and this can open many ways. Ethan asked if the king has given their family anything else besides the immunity, and his sister explained that they received some golds too, but they are forced to live here because of what happened 10 years ago. His sister continued to explain that 10 years during the war, when their grandfather and father died, the King Zygmunt decided to hire Senate a group of collateral members of their family, and now they runs their family until Ethan comes of age, which is 20, and they force them to live like this. Ethan didn't like hearing any of this. King was bad during his previous life, but this one seemed worse for him. He felt anger after realizing how his sister was suffering while the Senate ran their family. He felt a strong desire of revenge. Ethan knew that he will turn 20 in 8 months, which meant that he had exactly 8 months to regain his strength. His sister began to cry because of what happened 10 years ago when Ethan tried to awaken the mana using an ancient technique of their family. Ethan tried to calm his sister and she was happy at least for seeing his little brother again in such state. That night Ethan couldn't sleep because all he could think about is revenge and getting his family back on the track. He was well aware of the dirty politics that was getting played and how he must counter. Ethan's sister wake up next day happy and she was in good mood to feed her brother, but suddenly she saw some men at her house, and this ruined her mood immediately. She approached them and found out it's actually the Grand Chamberlain who was there for some important business. Grand Chamberlain didn't waste any time and immediately begun to harass her instantly, but she begged him for not doing that, but Grand Chamberlain didn't care. He reminded her that he is from Baron Kargaz's family. His stare was scary and it scared her. Disappointed, she returned to his brother and his brother asked her how come they have servants still. Ethan's sister explained that they are sponsored by the other families and they can't do anything about it. Ethan got up from the table and told her sister that he will be back in a while after having a chat with the servants about an important matter. Grand Chamberlain at the same time was enjoying himself because of how good his job was. He was getting paid monthly for doing such easy thing. He was well aware of the dirty politics and he was enjoying it to fullest. There was nothing stopping him. Grand Chamberlain ordered another servant to draft a letter for him, but suddenly someone punched him so hard he fell away. When he regained his senses, what he saw scared him for his life. He saw the Archduke well and alive standing in front of him. The Chamberlain was taken aback by Ethan's actions, and he warned the Archduke that, regardless of his status, he couldn't simply act in any way he wanted. Ethan, however, didn't seem to care about the Chamberlain's words and slapped him across the face without any hesitation. He emphasized that Baron Kargaz's family wouldn't be able to protect the Chamberlain, leaving him feeling vulnerable and powerless. When the Chamberlain finally regained his composure, he asked Ethan why he was acting in this manner. Ethan's response was different and uninformative, leading the Chamberlain to believe that the Archduke was suffering from some kind of mental issue. He was worried about the Grand Duchess and immediately shouted orders at the maids to help and protect her. Once Ethan let the Chamberlain go, the latter bowed and assured Ethan that he would do better. But he couldn't help but think that Ethan was truly mad, and he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been lingering in his mind. Despite the conflict that just occurred, Ethan returned to his room, where he examined his body's condition. The mana exhaustion had spread throughout his body, but he believed that he could still fight. He believed that his body was in good shape despite not being active for 10 years, and he acknowledged that he was the best fighter on the continent. However, his veins that carried mana were extremely weak, leaving him to ponder how he would overcome this weakness in the future. As Ethan repaired the mana hole step by step, he focused on resonance. Resonance, the process in which vibrations align with the prepared mana's wavelength to pull mana into the mana hole, became his focus. He knew that filling the inside of the mana hole was essential to conquering it, and that stimulating the mana hole was essential for this process. He realized that basic stamina was the most essential foundation he needed, and he trained relentlessly. As he trained, the servants were surprised at his dedication to his body despite his slim frame. Mid-training, someone called out for the Grand Duchess and then Ethan rushed to the Golden Pub to deal with the matter. Upon arriving, Ethan and his servant witnessed the complete mess Ethan's brother was in, asking for more alcohol and throwing chairs around. Ethan, who had never witnessed such behavior, was surprised and immediately reacted by smashing the table in half and demanding an explanation from his brother. The guests inside the pub were shocked to see such a sudden outbreak of violence, but Ethan was adamant and would not be deterred by anyone who dared cross his path. He made it clear that his brother would either change his ways or face his wrath, and he was determined to make his brother accountable for his actions. Despite his surprise at his brother's behavior, Ethan remained focused on his personal growth and continued to train, determined to reach his full potential. He refused to allow his brother's actions to distract him from his goals. He remembered how his brother, who used to be quiet but full of passion and fought alongside him, had undergone a noticeable change. Wanting his younger brother to rest, he put Myers to sleep. Hands called out to Ethan and motioned towards 2 men in the corner, indicating that they were responsible for causing trouble for the youngest lord. The red-haired man was surprised to find the Archduke, who had previously fainted from mana rush, present in the pub. His subordinate asked for guidance on what to do next. Ethan replied that they should end their activities for the day and not escalate the situation. The red-haired man informed Ethan about the heavily intoxicated youngest lord, expressing worry about leaving Ethan alone in a potentially dangerous situation. When asked if they were truly leaving, the red-haired man hesitated, causing a sense of unease. Ethan questioned who had given them permission to leave. The subordinate tried to block Ethan, but Ethan instinctively punched him, sending him crashing into the wall. The red-haired man was astonished by Ethan's actions. Ethan declared that they had made a grave mistake by troubling his family and proceeded to confront the man. Despite the man's attempt to fight back, he realized he was no match for Ethan's magical powers and found himself utterly defenseless. After dealing with the boss, Ethan mercilessly eliminated the remaining subordinates of the red-haired man. Hans, filled with fear, called for Ethan and was instructed to clean up the place as they were leaving with Myers. Following the incident at the pub, Ethan and Myers returned to their lodging in Maya's dream, a place where Ethan reminisced about the loss of their parents at a young age. Without memories of their parents, Ethan relied on his older brother as a pillar of support and a father figure. Suddenly, Myers woke up, calling out his brother's name as if he had experienced a nightmare. Overwhelmed with emotion, tears welled up in Myers' eyes as he felt remorse for his helplessness. Out of nowhere, Ethan entered the room and asked if Myers was awake. Myers was taken aback but immediately embraced his brother. Ethan inquired about Taryn, their sister, as she had refused to disclose her whereabouts. Unsure if he should reveal the information, Myers eventually disclosed that Taryn had joined another family to learn a different technique. Curious about what Myers meant, Ethan asked for clarification, but Myers didn't have the specific details. In the midst of their conversation, Hans interrupted and handed over the money he had collected while wrapping things up at the pub. Ethan kept what he needed and generously gave the rest to Hans, who expressed gratitude. Hans wondered about the circumstances Taryn, their brother, might be facing. Although they were relieved that Taryn was still alive, they had no knowledge of the family he had joined. Ethan stated that in order to revive their family, they needed to regain their strength. He then asked Myers to show him his wrists to check if alcohol had debilitated him. Upon inspection, Ethan noticed a significant amount of impure energy in ordinary mana. This made him think that if Myers learned their family's breathing techniques, he could possess mana that burned like flames. Ethan assured Myers that his body was capable, and with training, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to become a knight. However, Myers had to choose between offense and defense. Overwhelmed by the idea of still having a chance to become a knight, Myers couldn't believe it. Ethan reassured him, sharing that he knew the family's secrets and could assist Myers in becoming a knight if he wished. Myers declared that, for the sake of protecting Ethan and their family, he would choose defense in his path to becoming a knight. Ethan asked if Myers was ready, as defense would require significant effort. With determination in his eyes, Myers assured his older brother that he was prepared. Ethan then instructed Hans to bring sandbags and wooden swords. In his thoughts, Ethan contemplated that the secret of their ruined family resided within him. While starting at the age of 15 might seem late, he believed Myers had the potential. He vowed to properly guide and raise Myers in the Baron Karga's household. Meanwhile, Baron Helmut, the patriarch of the household, was reading a letter sent by the Grand Chamberlain. After reading the letter, he discovered that the Archduke had awakened after a decade. Calling out to his butler, Baron Helmut ordered him to deliver the message to another collateral family, the Count Ferns. The Baron recognized Ethan's talent and good health, noting that his eyes resembled his father's. He felt the need to inform the collateral families that the spirit of their native country had been restored. Two of them kept practicing, and Myers ended up on the ground. Ethan told him to get up quickly, as their enemies wouldn't wait for him to stand. Then Ethan asked if Myers was feeling weak. Myers firmly replied that he wasn't weak at all and stood up again with fighting spirit. They continued their sword practice non-stop from morning till noon without taking a break. Meanwhile, Hans watched them from a distance. He found Ethan to be a scary man because he trained without rest and defeated his own brother, whom he hadn't seen in 10 years, with a lot of violence. Hans decided to behave well and not get in their way anymore, especially when it came to the Grand Duchess. They had a bad history. As the Grand Duchess observed her siblings practicing, she thought about how many things had changed since Ethan's return. The servant started working again after he woke up, and even the Grand Chamberlain's attitude had changed. She asked Hans, the Chamberlain, what kind of conversation he had with Ethan that made everyone work so hard. When Hans heard her question, he remembered the fear he felt when Ethan had beaten him mercilessly. He thought to himself that if that was considered a conversation, he shouldn't have any conversations with the Archduke. Hans quickly changed the topic, apologized to the Grand Duchess, and offered her a cookie. Hans suggested having tea in the garden to take advantage of the beautiful weather. However, the Grand Duchess questioned the sudden change in topic. Secretly, Hans had sent word to Baron Kargas and informed him that Ethan was awake and could already wield mana. The Baron assured Hans that an elders' meeting was in order and things were looking favorable. The Baron promised more wealth for Hans and instructed him to monitor the Archduke. Hans saw this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and decided to observe the situation from the inside, regardless of the outcome. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door and someone announced that the training session between the two dukes was over. Hans ordered for cold water and towels to be brought for the dukes to cool off. He instructed the servant to prepare for tea time immediately. During training, Myers blocked Ethan's attacks, surprising him. Ethan noticed his brother had adapted quickly and possessed natural physicality, stamina, persistence, and quick learning ability. He realized that Myers might soon be capable of facing an official knight. After the training, Hans offered them towels and mentioned that refreshments were prepared. He reminded them that the Baron had instructed him to observe and report on Ethan's actions, but he tricked the Baron to get some money instead. Ethan knew about Hans' motives, but he didn't mind as he wanted to use him for his own ends. Ethan told Hans to go to town to purchase equipment, and Hans could keep the remaining money for himself. Hans rushed to town to buy the items Ethan had requested. Ethan asked his brother how much he knew about their family's vision. Myers replied that he didn't know anything, and he was surprised that Ethan was aware of it. Myers then asked if Ethan had learned the family vision from their father. Ethan explained that the Ardens' vision was different from other families and that Myers must have great determination to restore their family's glory. Ethan asked if Myers was ready to give up all the mana he had accumulated so far. Myers replied that he was, especially if it benefited his brother and family. Meanwhile, a young boy knocked on the door loudly and called out for Sir Wilden. He told him that the youngest lord had come in and was making a lot of noise. Sir Wilden got up and asked what was happening at the Red Scorpion headquarters. Even though the lord had been well behaved the day before, 2 days ago in the evening, Ethan had taught his brother a new way of breathing. He told him that it was a secret technique of the family that involved a black flame. The basics of this black flame were contained in the breath of the black flame breathing technique. Ethan explained to his brother that, as a true member of the Arden family, Myers needed to have the black flame. Hearing this, Myers thought about whether he could go through the 4 steps of training: resonance, dissemination, circulation, and enlightenment. He wondered if, by completing these steps, his mana would completely change and become a black flame. In order to learn the new breathing technique, Myers emptied his mana and filled it with flames. He followed his brother's guidance and successfully acquired the Arden family's mana. Ethan told Myers that it might be difficult at first, but once the flames settled in his body, he would feel a clear difference. He assured Myers that he would be able to complete the resonance within 2 months. Ethan instructed his brother to get ready because they would have to go somewhere the next day. At the present time, Ethan, Myers, and Hans were standing in front of a building, ready for their destination. Hans informed Ethan that they had arrived at the place where the Red Scorpion group resided, the ones who had caused trouble for the youngest lord. Hans mentioned a rumor that the enemies used mana, but Ethan wasn't concerned. He ordered Myers to go ahead. Myers prepared himself and forcefully kicked open the door. He declared that they would pay for insulting the Duke family and proceeded to strike one of the men inside using a wooden sword. The others quickly reacted and surrounded him. Ethan and Hans stood in the corner, observing. Hans felt worried, while Ethan had a smile on his face. Ethan thought that Myers had become much stronger in the past few days of training but still lacked some confidence. That's why he brought him there, even though it was risky. One of the men attacked when Myers was exposed, managing to land a hit. However, Myers had deliberately taken the attack, knowing that if he had dodged it, he would have given up his advantageous position and become vulnerable. Ethan recognized Myers' decision and praised him. He then asked Hans for his opinion on how Myers was doing. Hans thought to himself that it was frightening to see his brother being struck with a sword. Sir Wilden shouted to stop the fight and asked Myers what this was all about. He stopped himself when he saw Ethan looking at him, remembering what his brother had told him. He realized that Ethan was the Archduke. Sir Wilden asked Ethan if he was the one who had broken his brother's arm. Ethan then asked if there's something. Sir Wilden thought that Ethan was arrogant and wanted to harm him right then and there. But he knew he had to be patient and discuss the matter with the Baron first. He told Ethan to resolve the issue involving the brothers, and although they had suffered more injuries, he would consider the Duke family's reputation and let it go. Ethan grinned, thinking to himself that it was actually the Red Scorpion group who had harmed his brother, yet Sir Wilden spoke as if he was being kind. Ethan said to Myers that these people were worthless and beyond redemption. He believed they needed to be taught a lesson by taking care of many of them. Sir Wilden warned Ethan that he would have to intervene if he didn't stop. Ethan simply responded with a challenge. After that, Ethan manifested red mana on his hand, which caught Wilden's attention. Wilden recalled the rumors about the Arden family's mana burning like flames, but he thought those were exaggerated rumors and he wouldn't be scared of Ethan. Wilden unleashed his technique, which Ethan recognized and found familiar. Ethan skillfully dodged Wilden's attack, calling him a foolish bastard, and unleashed a barrage of punches until Wilden fell to the ground. After defeating him, Ethan demanded to know who had taught Wilden the mana breathing technique. Wilden remained silent in response. Ethan threatened him, stating that if he refused to talk, he would force him to speak. Eventually, Wilden asked for a moment and revealed that Baron Kargas had been the one to teach him the technique. Upon hearing this, Ethan realized that Baron Kargas would be his next challenge. Ethan understood that he and his family were about to face the ultimate test, fighting for their freedom and future. The odds were against them, but Ethan knew he had to gather all his strength and courage to emerge victorious in the battle and bring his family closer together. Using the memory sphere, Ethan discovered that Baron Kargas had ordered Wilden to capture the youngest lord by any means necessary. Additionally, the Baron had stolen and shared the Duke's breathing technique with Wilden. Ethan called out to Hans to provide a report, and Hans informed him that the youngest Duke had taken care of everything. They had retrieved all the illegally obtained money and dealt with the leader. Hans asked if Ethan still needed the leader, but Ethan stated that there was enough evidence in the memory sphere. Ethan reflected on the collateral family who had stolen the main family's vision and attempted to harm the direct line of the family. Their crimes included drugs, gambling, murder, and illegal businesses. The evidence against them was substantial, but it was not the right time to act. Ethan believed that dealing with the Baron's knights would be challenging with his current strength. He planned to use the accumulated mana from resonance to unleash fiery attacks and gather more mana to strengthen himself. He focused on sowing the seeds of fire in his wrist, and once he completed the basics of cycling, he could target the Baron himself. Ethan instructed Hans to keep the memory sphere safely stored, along with any other spoils it contained. He warned Hans that if he wanted to stay alive, he must forget the contents of the memory sphere. Hans acted as if he had forgotten everything that happened in the Baron's household. Meanwhile, the infuriated Baron contemplated assassinating Ethan but hesitated because doing so on his own territory would bring unwanted responsibility. If things escalated, all the other collaterals could become his responsibility as well. He made the decision not to escalate the situation at the moment. He mentioned that in 2 months there would be an important meeting with the elders where an opportunity might arise. Just then, the butler entered the room and informed the Baron that Hans had sent a message. The Baron eagerly opened the letter and read its contents. The butler commented that the requested price seemed reasonable and asked for the Baron's instructions. Frustrated, the Baron tore the letter apart and exclaimed that Hans wanted 100 gold coins. Reluctantly, he had no choice but to provide the requested amount and instructed the butler to double-check if Hans was attempting to deceive him. 3 days later, on a sunny day, workers were spotted renovating the Arden's hunting mansion. Ethan had successfully replenished half of the mana in his arms. Ethan remarked that the construction was nearly finished, and Hans informed him that the Red Scorpion had more money than expected, resulting in increased expenses. Ethan reminded Hans to ensure they kept a fair share for themselves. As they entered the dining room, Ethan noticed his sister dressed beautifully and praised her appearance. Ethan thought to himself that Hans had done a great job, and now their family felt like proper nobles. He expressed his determination to provide his sister with only the best things to wear and eat. During the meal, Ethan asked his younger brother about his wounds, and Myers reassured him that they would heal by next week. Ethan felt relieved and grateful for the update. He then inquired if his siblings were aware of a traditional family ceremony held at the mansion. One of his siblings questioned its existence, prompting Ethan to discuss with Hans their plan to go hunting in Pushk's Mountain. Hans offered to arrange servants and preparations, but Ethan insisted that only their siblings and Hans would go, without the need for additional staff. They scheduled the hunting trip for 1 week later at Pushk's Mountain. The group of 4 headed to the mountain. Hans thought it had been a tough week, dealing with nasty monsters that kept attacking them from the first day. He genuinely believed he might not make it out alive if it weren't for the Archduke's presence. He couldn't understand why the Archduke purposely exposed himself to dangerous creatures just to train the youngest lord. After walking for a while, they reached their destination, the Temple of Fire. It had been discovered long ago by an ancestor of the Arden family and had since been a place for funeral rites and to seek blessings from the fire spirits. The Arden tradition was for children over 10 years old to meet the fire spirits and receive their energy, getting accustomed to fire. This ceremony, called the Fire Blessing, was mandatory for every family member to go through in order to use fire. Hans asked if it was all right for him to be there, as the place seemed important. Ethan assured him that it was fine. Once they reached the ceremony altar, Ethan explained to Myers that they needed to offer tributes and perform a dance when fire sparks started flying. This would attract the spirits, who would then bless them. The Arden family's history had changed significantly in the past 15 years, but before that, it resembled Ethan's previous life. It had been over 100 years since the family had made a contract with the fire spirits. However, there was a concern. What if the contract had been broken in this altered history? If that were the case, they would have to give up the blessing. Ethan began the ritual, reciting the sacred passage of fire. The passage opened, allowing the spirits to appear. Myers had a spirit of medium rank, while his sister had a low-rank salamander spirit. Ethan thought about his past life when he had command over fire. he shouted, seeking the spirit's blessing, and a large fireball emerged from the altar. Ethan noticed it was even bigger than Ignis, a fireball from his previous life. The spirit spoke and asked if Ethan had called upon the blood of the Arden family for worship. Ethan confidently replied, expressing his desire to receive the spirit's blessing. Suddenly, Ethan found himself in his inner world, where a bright red flame took on the form of a human figure. The Fire Monarch introduced himself and explained that Ethan was now in his inner world, a place where fire was abundant. The Fire Monarch eagerly challenged Ethan to showcase his talent, igniting a determination within him. Outside of Ethan's inner world, Myers and the Grand Duchess watched with a mix of concern and anticipation as Ethan floated amidst a fiery congregation of spirits. Although unsure of the unfolding spectacle, Myers held unwavering faith in his older brother's abilities. Meanwhile, Ethan plunged into a state of intense focus, tapping into the depths of his memory to retrieve the sensations of commanding fire as a transcendent being. With sheer determination, he grappled with the power coursing through him, striving to control even a fraction of the monarch's fiery essence. After an arduous struggle, he triumphed, successfully taming a small portion of the infernal energy. Overjoyed with his accomplishment, Ethan declared his victory to the Fire Monarch. Though the controlled flame was but a mere flicker compared to the monarch's vast power, the monarch expressed astonishment at finding a human capable of wielding his fiery might. True to his word, the monarch bestowed upon Ethan everything he desired, allowing him to absorb the monarch's formidable power. Satisfied with his newfound strength, Ethan humbly requested the monarch's blessings for his beloved siblings. Granting his wish, the Fire Monarch affectionately referred to Ethan as a child of fire, remarking on the amusement he derived from their encounter. Assuring Ethan that their paths would cross again, the monarch left him with a sense of wonder and curiosity. As the fiery energy settled within him, Ethan contemplated the extraordinary destiny woven for his siblings. His musculoskeletal system had undergone remarkable improvement, and his veins were cleansed to an astonishing extent, over 90%. So confident was he in his physical prowess that he dared to proclaim himself as possessing the greatest physique on the entire continent, a testament to the incredible transformations he had undergone. Myers and his sister needed time to undergo the same changes, so Ethan had to control the fires while they waited. Hans was shocked by what he saw, a legendary spirit monarch, something he had only heard of in stories. He had reported that an intimidating archduke was fighting alone, but now he had received the monarch's blessing. As hours passed, he understood the purpose of being there and had to decide which side to support. Ethan explained to his siblings that the Fire Monarch's blessing transformed their bones, muscles, and veins. Myers couldn't believe how much had changed and marveled at the incredible power of the monarch's blessing. Ethan realized that the direct blessing from the monarch exceeded his expectations and was grateful for his past memories. Myers asked Ethan if feeling extremely hungry after the blessing was normal, and Ethan confirmed it was. They decided to find a nearby resting place to eat. Outside the temple, Myers admired having a cabin near the hunting grounds, and Hans credited it for showcasing his skills. Myers asked where they were going, wondering if there were more surprises. Ethan assured him that he had something truly astonishing to show him, promising a surprise that would leave Myers amazed. Completely surprised, the three of them descended into the secret storage room. Hans was astounded to find something precious there. Ethan asked him if he knew what it was, and Hans recognized it as peacock's leather, a rare and high-quality item young girls couldn't buy in the capital. Ethan instructed Hans to find a trustworthy merchant to sell the products and gather all the items because they would head down the next day. Upon returning to the mansion, Ethan was at his desk when Hans called him, seeking permission to enter. Hans informed Ethan that he had found a merchant group named Mrs. to sell the items. Ethan was taken aback by the mention of Mrs. and immediately asked Hans to meet them without delay, leaving him bewildered. Ethan entered the guest room, apologizing for his tardiness. The guest reassured him and expressed gratitude for Ethan's concern. Introducing himself as Michelin, the head of Mrs., the guest thanked Ethan and began their conversation. Ethan, emphasizing the importance of trust in their transaction, requested the guest's real name, alluding to the tradition of going independent for a few years to hide one's identity and train. The guest responded, claiming Ethan's mistake and causing Ethan to mention the realistic mask in the hidden escort night. Alarmed, the guest realized that it had been 3 years since he had secretly gone independent, changing his voice so even the king wouldn't recognize him. Ethan recalled hearing about it directly from the guest in his past life. Impressed by Ethan's keen insight, the guest reintroduced himself as Jaren Bessos. Ethan greeted Jaren and identified him as the head of a small family. Ethan then informed Jaren that the items he was selling wouldn't be helpful to his expertise and asked if he had an interest in potion making. Jaren was taken aback by Ethan's knowledge and revealed that certain things had come into his hands coincidentally. Ethan explained that in his past life, many people, including the Bessis Marquis family, had revealed the lower levels of the family vision, including the art of potion making, to combat the Wyverians. Therefore, the only people who knew how to craft potions were Ethan himself and the original writer. He mentioned that the Bessis Marquis family had used all their money to support the Ardens, making them the only trustworthy option. Ethan replied that 15 years ago, during the war with the Wyverians, the Marquis family had supported them with all their money, enabling the Ardens to rebuild. Ethan found it ironic how both families, who had suffered losses during the war, were now falling while those who had hidden away were thriving, feasting on the aftermath of the fallen. He also revealed that he had 7 months until he became the head and planned to deal with all the traitors before then. Ethan expected Marquis to support Arden once again. It was a well-known truth that the 7 families supported the 10 collaterals to undermine the Ardens. Jaren hesitated to give an answer to Ethan due to the risks involved in aligning himself with the Archduke. Ethan acknowledged Jaren's concerns and proceeded to demonstrate a product by cutting his hand, leaving Jaren shocked. Ethan assured him that it was just a simple demonstration of a special potion, which had similar efficacy to a low-rank potion but could be produced at only 10% of the cost. Jaren found it hard to believe, considering the precise calculations required for the herb ratio and fermentation time. Ethan revealed that he possessed other crafting recipes besides potions and offered to give Jaren all the items he planned to sell for free if he accepted the offer. Jaren had to make a decision, and he accepted the solo contract, realizing that partnering with the Archduke would be better than witnessing his family's reputation decline further. Meanwhile, Hans informed Ethan that the Baron had exceeded the limit on the number of soldiers and was deploying the Red Scorpions throughout the city, exploiting the citizens under the guise of protection. Ethan expressed his anger towards the Baron's actions and asked Hans to provide him with the document identifying the person responsible for managing the taxes in the lower town. Hans revealed that it was semi-noble Heims, a close confidante of Baron Kargas. Upon learning Heims's whereabouts, Ethan and his group immediately set out, planning to eliminate Heims first. Ethan realized that taking down Baron Kargas's family would take 4 months, but after encountering the Fire Manor, he was determined to deal with Heims sooner. Somewhere in Barrows, Heims and his escorts were collecting taxes when an old man, the custom officer, approached him, stating that they were missing some money. Heims was enraged by the chief's inability to pay the taxes in full and arrogantly claimed that they had taken down the Red Scorpion. Despite the old man's awareness of the truth, Ethan and Hans arrived at the small village. Hans loudly pointed out the tax collector to Ethan, who released a strong killing intent towards the collector and his companions. The escort knight accompanying the tax collector sensed an unknown intensity emanating from Ethan, and realized that Ethan possessed a small amount of mana. He tried to intervene, threatening to punish Ethan for obstructing the justice of the Baron's family. However, Ethan unsheathed his sword, condemning their plundering of the village. In a swift and unexpected move, Ethan attacked the knight, surprising him by halting his attack and changing his trajectory, ultimately defeating him with a single strike. The tax collector and soldiers were left in shock. Heinz ordered the soldiers to attack Ethan, but Hans informed them that resistance was futile, revealing Ethan's true identity as the Archduke and commanding them to drop their weapons. The soldiers complied. Later, at Heinz' mansion in Morocco town, Ethan and Hans were present with the tax collector. Heinz confessed that Baron Kargas had instructed him to collect additional taxes, and all the transaction records were documented in a private account book they possessed. Heims had gathered more evidence of the Baron's misconduct. Meanwhile, the Baron was engaged in a conversation, discovering that other families were prepared to abandon him as bait, fueling his fury. At the same time, a letter arrived detailing the tax collection. With no other options remaining, the Baron decided to personally invite the Archduke to his mansion, considering him a formidable opponent. He informed Myers to prepare for his departure to an indirect family, explaining 3 reasons for this decision. Firstly, there were only 2 successors remaining since Terran had left. Secondly, they anticipated that the Branch family would attempt to hinder Ethan's ascension to the position. And thirdly, Myers would receive significant support by feigning loyalty to their side. Myers fully comprehended Ethan's plans, but Ethan worried about his brother's safety and aligning with the enemy. However, Myers reassured Ethan that he would be fine. On the day of Myers' departure, the Grand Duchess scolded him for his lack of preparations. Ethan expressed his trust in Myers but emphasized the importance of caution. After bidding farewell, Myers set off with Hans. Meanwhile, another carriage approached the Archduke's mansion, carrying 2 individuals who complained about the poor condition of the road. The yellow-haired boy questioned his companion, Chiron, about the amount of their allowance. Chiron replied that the Baron had been generous, providing them with 100 gold coins. However, the other man declared that he would only offer 10 gold coins instead of the 100. His companion questioned what he would do if the Archduke became angry. The yellow-haired man confidently stated that as a 3-star knight, he would be fine. While Ethan was engrossed in his training, he pondered what had transpired and where his second brother was. Frustrated by his inability to reach him, a carriage suddenly arrived, and the yellow-haired man emerged. Ethan questioned the man's identity, and the yellow-haired man arrogantly threw a pouch containing 10 gold coins at him. Enraged, Ethan punched the man and demanded to know when the Baron's family had surpassed the Duke family. He then grabbed and lifted the man, commanding him to repeat his statement, delivering another punch when the man mentioned Baron Kargas. The yellow-haired man unleashed his mana, prompting Ethan to respond with a suppression skill that caused the man to fall down once again. Ethan remarked that it didn't hurt at all and realized that the man couldn't release his mana. The Baron's son questioned Ethan about his actions, and Ethan explained that he had sealed the yellow-haired man's mana. He scornfully mentioned that thieves who stole other people's scrolls to learn from wouldn't even understand what a mana technique was. Enraged, the man attacked Ethan but was once again defeated. He then asked the other man why they had come, and the man replied that they had come to deliver an invitation and the supporting fee. The following day, as Ethan prepared to depart, his sister asked if he would be all right. He reassured her, stating that he had received an invitation. On his way to the Baron's mansion, Ethan contemplated that whatever the Baron planned to execute, his punishment had already been decided. In the minor city under Baron Kargas's headquarters, there was a deceptive facade of ostentation, but the citizens hid their devastation and despair. The only ones who despised this situation were the Dukearden family, whose blood had been sacrificed and seemed to cry out from the ground. Ethan arrived at his destination and was suddenly approached by a man who asked if he was the guest. The man inquired about the whereabouts of the third son. Ethan confronted him, and the man with violet hair angrily grabbed Ethan's collar, claiming he would fix Ethan's attitude. In response, Ethan swiftly kicked the man, causing him to fall to the ground. The man was astonished that he hadn't seen Ethan's attack coming. Ethan then grabbed the third son and threw him next to the man. Infuriated to see his younger brother in such a pitiful state, the man drew his sword and launched a deadly attack at Ethan. Ethan noticed that his opponent was using stolen techniques and managed to dodge the strike. He seized his opponent's hair and forcefully brought him down to the ground, causing the ground to crack. With his opponent immobilized, Ethan declared that he would end him with his next attack. However, their confrontation was interrupted by someone yelling at Ethan to stop. Another knight had arrived to attack him but was blocked. The man introduced himself as Menhartman, the Grand Master of the Baron family's knights. He warned Ethan that if he didn't show consideration, he would resort to force. Ethan questioned whether it was right to raise a sword against a direct line family member of a duke. Ethan informed the Grand Master Knight that if he wished to use violence, he needed to be better. The Grand Master Knight accepted Ethan's challenge and rushed forward to attack him. The two clashed their swords, blocking each other's strikes. The knight made another move, but Ethan skillfully dodged it. Ethan observed that the knight was quite skilled. They continued their intense clash, with the knight believing he had successfully suppressed Ethan without causing any wounds. However, out of nowhere, Ethan's sword struck directly at the knight, shocking him. The knight thought he was going to die, but Ethan turned his blade, sparing him intentionally. The knight wondered why Ethan had chosen not to finish him off. At that moment, a woman arrived and held her third son, furious that Ethan had touched him. She ordered the Grand Master Knight to arrest Ethan. The Baron then appeared and told her to stop. The Baron addressed Ethan, mentioning that it had been years since their last meeting. He requested that Ethan send his son, who was lying on the ground, to him. Ethan declined the request, stating that the son of someone who disregards the laws of the Duke family and raises a blade against an Arden deserved severe punishment, even execution. The Baron urged Ethan to calm down and apologized on his son's behalf. He further explained that even with Ethan's immunity, the Duke's law held no real power anymore. The Senate had become the center of the dukedom, and his son's judgment would be held there. The Baron proposed that they resolve the misunderstanding between them and join forces. Baron Kargas believed that Ethan had killed his son, but Ethan had spared him. The Baron yelled at Ethan, warning him not to test his patience and demanding that he let go of his son and beg for forgiveness. In response, Ethan grabbed the Baron's son and declared his intention to eliminate the entire Karkas Baron family. He accused the Baron of breaking the vassal contract and hiding their sins to protect their direct line. Ethan announced that the Baron would be charged with treason, stripping him of his rights, title, and castle. Meanwhile, in the capital of the Hydern Empire, a meeting was coming to an end in Palantium. The king asked if there was anything else to add, and Marquis Blauden of the Marquis Bess's family politely requested permission to speak, which the king granted. The king was puzzled by the alliance between the Archduke and Marquis Bess's family. Marquis Bessus conveyed Ethan's message to the king, revealing that Baron Kargas had violated the vassal contract in various ways, such as breaking tariff limits, forming secret troops, and illegally selling and leaking sensitive information about the Duke family. The evidence, including memory spheres, clearly showed these violations. Marquis Bessus also informed the king about Ethan's request for the confiscation of the Baron's castle. During the discussion, Marquis Bessus noticed that the 7 families of the kingdom were not pleased. The king contemplated which side to support. The 7 families aligned with the collateral or the legendary guardians of the kingdom, the Ardens. However, he decided to play it safe and not side with either party, stating that it was not a matter he could decide upon. The Ardens had already been removed from the Senate, and since this issue involved only one family, it didn't directly involve the king. The king expressed his trust in the Archduke to resolve the situation on his own. Marquis Bessus acknowledged the king's response and stated that he would deliver the message to Ethan. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the Baron's wife was in tears, and Menharten ordered the servants to close the windows and bring warm tea for her. Menharten informed another servant that he would return to the Baron and was reminded to be cautious. The Grand Master of the Knights sensed that something was amiss, wondering why Ethan had spared his life instead of killing him. Ethan continued to fight against the Baron's knights, narrowly dodging their attacks. The Baron believed that his knights were doing well in the fight against the Archduke. Menharten approached the Baron and informed him that he had safely escorted his wife to a secure location. The Baron contemplated the possibility of not needing to fight at all. However, Sir Menharten, one of the knights, realized that the Archduke was underestimating their abilities. Ethan jumped high to assess his enemies before launching another attack. He managed to evade being cornered. Baron Kargas wondered where Ethan had learned such techniques. The Baron declared that he would imprison the Archduke in the basement indefinitely, not just for 10 years but forever. Ethan, preparing for his next move, acknowledged the need to avoid harming innocent bystanders with his upcoming wide-range attack. Ethan unleashed a massive red-colored mana that enveloped the entire battlefield, leaving Baron Kargas bewildered by the intense energy emanating from Ethan. Sensing the danger, the Grand Master shouted for everyone to dodge. Ethan unleashed the second form of his ultimate attack, cutting down the Baron's elite knights, with some surviving but many perishing. The Grand Master valiantly defended the Baron, amazed by the overwhelming firepower displayed by Ethan with only a small amount of mana. Baron Kargas was in shock, unable to comprehend the defeat of his elite knights in a single strike. Ethan, reaching his limits and nearly depleted of mana, would have collapsed if he didn't possess the blessing of the Fire Monarch. Ethan approached the Baron, informing him that his turn was next and emphasizing that the punishment for disrespecting the Duke's family for so long would be severe. Terrified, the Baron urged his knights to take down the Archduke, promising rewards to whoever succeeded. The Grand Master, filled with fear, contemplated the possibility that Ethan's skill went beyond raw power and included precise targeting within his massive attack, something he had never witnessed before. The surviving knights keenly felt the vast power gap between them and the Archduke, realizing that even if they stood up, they wouldn't dare raise their blades against him. When Ethan asked the Grand Master if he wanted another round, the Grand Master acknowledged his defeat. Ethan attacked Baron Kargas, causing him to lose consciousness. The Grand Master hurriedly attended to the Baron's condition, and Ethan instructed him to imprison the Baron and keep a watchful eye over him. The Grand Master was shocked, questioning whether he should imprison his own lord with his own hands. Ethan reminded him that he was a loyal knight, and the Baron had already forfeited his title through treason. According to the law, the entire family would face execution if the Baron managed to escape. Ethan urged the Grand Master not to forget his purpose as a loyal knight. Menharten assured Ethan that he would follow his orders. Baron Kargas, now in prison, created a commotion and shouted, demanding to be released. Ethan entrusted the rest of the situation to Menharten and prepared to leave. Sir Menharten asked Ethan why he and a select few knights had been spared from the attack, despite following Baron Kargas's orders to attack Ethan. Ethan replied that the sword reveals one's true intentions and that he had likely sensed from their blades that these knights had a different mindset. He had encountered the same attitude from everyone he met after waking up from the Mana Rush. They all seemed to want to bury the Duke's family, who had once saved their country, as if their actions were something to be ashamed of. However, through his clashes with Sir Menharten and the other knights, Ethan realized that there were still people who respected the Duke's family. In this world, where such sentiments were rare, Ethan found some relief in knowing that there were individuals who remembered and honored the blade of the Duke's family. It didn't matter whether it was remorse or longing, the fact that someone still held respect for them was enough for Ethan. Realizing that he had spoken for too long, Ethan entrusted the situation to Menharten and proceeded to the Baron's office. Inside, he was greeted by a man named Raymond, the oldest son of the Baron family. Raymond informed Ethan that he had been waiting for his arrival. Ethan approached him cautiously, warning Raymond to choose his words wisely. Raymond, sensing the seriousness of the situation, acknowledged that he was different from his brothers and father. He proposed making a deal with Ethan. Ethan grinned and swiftly grabbed Raymond by the neck, lifting him up. He reminded Raymond that a deal can only be made when both parties are in a position of equality. He pointed out that the Baron family had committed treason against the direct line of the Arden family, and questioned whether Raymond thought he was in a suitable position to negotiate. Struggling to breathe, Raymond realized that he needed to share vital information before it was too late. He revealed that he possessed knowledge about the seventh family of the kingdom. Ethan released his grip on Raymond, but threatened him, stating that any lies would result in imprisonment for treason. Raymond assured Ethan that what he was about to disclose was indeed related to the seventh family. He handed Ethan a book containing an agreement made before the advent of technology. Raymond explained that after the Arden family's downfall, the seventh family had requested the Duke's vision book from the collateral families. Their intention was to safeguard against threats from neighboring nations, as their own military strength had been significantly weakened by war. As the seventh family lacked the technological understanding to fully utilize the vision, they had to rely on purchasing a simplified version from the collateral families. Ethan, frustrated by the incompetence of the Baron family, listened as Raymond revealed more details. He explained that high-ranked translations like mana breathing were extremely expensive, leading to heavy taxation of the citizens. Ethan dismissed the book as worthless, containing only miscellaneous skills. He believed that the Baron family had been foolish to give away something so important easily, ultimately resulting in their own downfall. In times of hardship, they had relied on alliances, but once the danger subsided, they succumbed to their own greed. Ethan decided to spare the remaining members of the Baron family, but he demanded that Raymond bring him all of the Baron's account books and wait at the outbuilding for further instructions. Raymond felt relieved to hear this arrangement. Suddenly, Ethan found himself in his past memories, seemingly training in the training grounds when a dragon swung a sword and slashed him. However, he realized that it was another knight who had been injured. He recognized the man who appeared before him as the past Baron Kargas. The past Baron questioned Ethan's right to exist, considering him an outsider and comparing him to those he despised. He cautioned Ethan against disrupting the natural order of the world. Ethan vehemently denied the past Baron's claims and struck at the phantom image of Kargas. He resolved to protect his family, including his sister Myers and Terran, who were alive in this timeline unlike in his previous life. The right or wrong of the world's flow no longer mattered to him. In that moment, Ethan heard someone yelling outside the gate. An old man was causing a commotion, claiming that the Archduke knew him. He grabbed Jaren, demanding to meet the Archduke. Jaren informed him that he, too, was a guest. Ethan approached them and asked if the man was Prixian, recognizing his presence and causing the old man to feel relieved at seeing the Archduke. Prixian, known as the document-catching monster in Ethan's past life, was a key member of the Arden family. He had risen from being a commoner solely based on his exceptional skills. With his efficiency, no administrative task took him more than an hour. After the commotion at the gate subsided, he, who had been expelled along with other executive officials for supporting Ethan, explained the situation to him. Ethan realized that they had systematically removed useful individuals to weaken the Duke's family from within. He had been searching for someone capable of handling administrative tasks, and the prison incident seemed to have occurred at the right time. Ethan asked him to send his regards to Michelin, a merchant who had worked for the Duke's family. He apologized to Jaren, who reassured him that everything was all right. Jaren was surprised by the sudden takeover of the Baron's family by the Archduke, and Jaren expressed concerns about possible actions from the Senate. However, Ethan dismissed the topic, emphasizing that the place belonged to the Duke's family within the Arden's land and ownership would depend on the king's decision. Ethan informed Jaren that he had gathered information from various sources, including the eldest son of the Baron's family, the collateral families, and even the seventh family. They were all involved in quite a spectacle, orchestrating a complex web of events. Ethan asked Jaren if the direct line of Arden really needed permission to reclaim what was rightfully theirs from a useless king who had allowed such a state of affairs. He reassured Jaren not to worry and promised to bring good news soon. Jaren expressed his trust in Ethan's words, acknowledging that he would believe it because it came from Ethan. He then mentioned that he would attend to the business assigned to him and left. Prixian, having observed their conversation, told Ethan that in the current situation, he needed a considerable number of administrative personnel. He mentioned that he was raising a child and asked if Ethan would like to meet him. A white-haired boy entered the room, introduced himself as Lawrence, and greeted Ethan. This surprised Ethan, as the name Lawrence triggered memories of someone he knew. Ethan recalled his past memories of fighting against the dragon army, specifically a white-haired knight named Sylvia. Sylvia would always ride a horse and approach Ethan, informing him about the troops' positions. Ethan acknowledged Sylvia's exceptional speed and noted that he had been working diligently, planning strategies for a week. Sylvia's tactical prowess had played a significant role in turning the tide of battle, especially with Arden's death-defying core. Ethan realized that Sylvia was the only soldier who consistently formulated such intricate strategies, strategically positioning the cavalry in the enemy's vulnerable spots. Ethan expressed his admiration and acknowledged that he needed to recognize Sylvia's exceptional abilities. Ethan realized that Sylvia hadn't slept for 3 days, causing him concern that Sylvia might collapse under such strain. Sylvia explained that he never felt at ease until he had ingrained the plan and tactics into his very being. He emphasized the gravity of the situation, where countless lives were at stake, and expressed his willingness to sacrifice himself if it meant saving even one more person from the monsters. Ethan urged Sylvia to sever the ties with the invading forces and protect the human race. On the day of battle, Ethan led his troops with Sylvia's brilliant tactics, despite the heavy losses incurred. Through Sylvia's genius strategies, the humans managed to overcome their significant power disadvantage and emerge victorious. However, that battle marked the last time Ethan saw Sylvia. Returning to the present, Ethan was certain that the white-haired child, Lawrence, was Sylvia. He wondered why Sylvia was now calling himself Lawrence and noted a change in his demeanor. It seemed that things had shifted since Arden's downfall, with the collateral families assuming more dominant roles. Lawrence expressed gratitude to Ethan for seeking revenge on the Baron, sharing that his family had suffered greatly due to excessive taxes. Prixan informed Ethan that he had come because Lawrence wanted to meet him. Ethan contemplated testing Lawrence's abilities to see if he possessed the same talent as Sylvia. Ethan acknowledged that Prixan had recommended Lawrence, indicating that Lawrence must be aware of the current situation involving the Baron. He inquired about Lawrence's suggestion on how to handle the remaining members of the Baron's family. Lawrence proposed sparing them but using them as scarecrows to deter other families from easily meddling with Ethan. He explained that even as scarecrows, the name Kargas still held influence, and by guaranteeing them a position, Ethan could potentially recruit informants in the future, considering many had been forced out due to the ongoing power struggle. Lawrence also emphasized that Ethan should leverage as many people as possible, as he lacked in numbers. In response, Ethan asked Lawrence for guidance on what to do next. Lawrence advised Ethan to build an army, stating that he couldn't handle the other 9 families alone. He suggested tricking the collateral families and instigating conflicts among them, allowing Ethan to buy time. Lawrence further elaborated that if Ethan could divide the Duke's land into 3 parts, victory would already be within reach. Ethan couldn't help but smile, realizing that Lawrence and Sylvia were indeed the same person. He commended Lawrence's intelligence, remarking to Prixan that he had a smarter child than expected. Ethan then directly asked Lawrence if he wanted to become his advisor, recognizing Lawrence's strategic acumen and value in his pursuit of power. In the present, 2 knights guarded the entrance of a town while a few men were held captive. Menharton warned his opponent not to overdo it and expressed his willingness to face him. A man surrounded by blue mana questioned Menharton about his identity as the Baron's knight. Menharton confidently replied that he didn't need to prove himself to the man, stating that building the right allies was a knight's duty. The man attacked Menharton, accusing him of being a traitor. However, Menharton swiftly countered by kicking the man's chin, incapacitating him with a single blow. Menharton then ordered the other knights to restrain and neutralize the man's mana. Lawrence entered the scene and commended Sir Menharton for his actions, acknowledging his competence. Menharton reflected on how initially surprised he was when instructed to annihilate the 8 gates of darkness by someone he had just met. However, Lawrence proved to be highly efficient in handling tasks, as if they had been meticulously planned for a long time. Lawrence informed them that they should proceed before attracting attention, as there were still 7 locations left to address. Lawrence assured them that she would take care of all of them before nightfall. A few hours earlier, Ethan had approached Lawrence, expressing his desire for Lawrence to become his advisor. Prixan, sensing the weight of the upcoming conversation, left the room. Lawrence expressed gratitude to Ethan for the offer but declined. However, Lawrence then revealed a significant truth about herself, her true gender. Sylvia, as Lawrence was formerly known, had grown up in a slum with parents of low social status. Being a girl and lacking education, she faced the hardships of life at its lowest point. Her father, sharing similar sentiments, resented her for being born a girl and not being able to join the knights, even blaming her for not being able to afford the medicine he needed when the Baron collected taxes. After her father's passing, as they couldn't pay the taxes, collectors attempted to sell her as a slave. However, unwilling to leave her younger brother alone, they had no choice but to live while constantly evading the collectors. They resorted to stealing and pickpocketing just to survive. But even that was denied to them when the 8 dark gates discovered her brother and took him away as well. Lawrence or Sylvia endured being looked down upon simply because she was a girl, and after losing everything precious to her, life felt utterly meaningless. Determined to continue living, she made the decision to assume her brother's identity and live as a man, fearing that if her true gender was revealed, People would accuse Ethan of hiring her for unsavory reasons. Sylvia apologized and expressed her inability to become Ethan's advisor. However, Ethan saw things differently. He urged her to disregard those hurtful words and emphasized that talent knows no rank or gender. He encouraged her to hold her head high and confidently confront anyone who dared to mock her, assuring her that he would stand by her side. Ethan explained that the Eight Gates were private organizations employed by the Baron to evade taxes. Ethan seized the opportunity to offer Sylvia a chance for revenge against the Eight Gates and asked if she could handle it with the assistance of a knight and a few soldiers. Sylvia confidently replied that if given one day, she would completely eradicate the organization from the city. Ethan expressed his anticipation for a successful outcome. Meanwhile, a few days earlier in Hermes City, Ethan had instructed Myers to approach Count Ferns and feign allegiance to their cause. Myers and Hans were currently in Count Ferns' Kelmont Castle, and Myers remarked on the impressive office. Count Fears inquired about the purpose of Myers' visit, and Myers sighed, mentioning that his brother had been behaving strangely since awakening. He explained that Ethan was causing him pain, and whenever Ethan annoyed him, he couldn't tolerate it. Myers added that Ethan had been unusually quiet, possibly due to the side effects of the mana rush he experienced 10 years ago, which had transformed him into a completely different person. Shaman, silently observing the situation, felt that all the pieces were falling into place. He had been unable to contact Baron Kargas for several days, leading him to believe that the Archduke had taken action. Shaman concluded that there was no need to rush, as using the youngest duke as planned would serve their purposes. At that moment, Myers unexpectedly proposed a deal to Shaman. Shaman expressed his interest in the deal proposed by Myers, prompting Myers to explain that it was the very reason for his visit. He revealed that he had coincidentally discovered the existence of a factional structure among the collaterals, with even the Senate members being divided. Count Ferns wondered where Myers had obtained such information, realizing that the collaterals were splitting into two factions to gain more power and control over the land. Myers disclosed that the Amelan faction, led by Count Lugon, and the Ferns faction, centered around Count Ferns himself, were on the verge of a confrontation. Both factions were eagerly awaiting an opportunity to strike. Myers claimed to have uncovered something significant, thanks to which he learned that Baron Kargas had deliberately tried to manipulate him and turn their family into scapegoats. Count Ferns grew alert, suspecting that his strategy might have been exposed. However, Myers deflected the blame onto Count Lugon, intentionally misleading Count Ferns. He proposed a mutually beneficial deal that would aid both of their goals. Count Ferns, perplexed by the unfolding situation, had initially believed that Myers had come out of a grudge. Myers clarified that if Count Ferns assisted him in overthrowing his reckless brother and allowed him to become the head of the family, it would be advantageous for both of them. Count Ferns expressed his full support for Count Lugon's downfall, and assured Myers that he would stand by him in this endeavor. He saw this as a tremendous opportunity and was determined not to let it slip away. Count Ferns commended Myers for making the right decision by approaching him and pledged to do whatever it took to help Myers become the head of the family. Later that night, Count Ferns summoned Hans to his chambers. Hans entered the room and respectfully greeted Count Ferns. Count Ferns explained that he had called Hans because he had a question for him. He pointed out that it was evident that Hans had leaked false information to Myers. Count Ferns asked Hans why he had helped Myers, emphasizing that Hans wouldn't be safe either if the truth came to light. Hans replied that he was the Chamberlain of Baron Kargas and had come to Count Ferns to protect the youngest duke from the Archduke's aggression. He explained that the Archduke harbored strong hostility toward the Kargas family, which prevented him from seeking help from the barons. Hans also highlighted the potential consequences if he had approached the opposing faction. He admitted to slightly manipulating the truth when he informed the youngest duke. Count Ferns remarked that Hans was a cunning individual, acknowledging his assistance and stating that coming to him instead of going to the Baron was a wise choice. Count Ferns declared that he now considered Hans as one of his own and assured him not to worry. Hans had earned his trust and would be regarded as part of Count Ferns' inner circle. Hans expressed his gratitude for Count Ferns' generosity. Count Ferns, however, expressed concern about deciphering the Archduke's intentions immediately after Helmut's attack. Hans volunteered and requested the Count's permission to go to the Baron's place. He explained that he wanted to prove his loyalty to Count Ferns, who had taken him in. Hans emphasized his experience in observing the Archduke up close and his connections in that circle, assuring the Count that he would be helpful. Count Ferns then asked Hans if he could gather information on the Archduke's movements and timing, to which Hans confidently replied in the affirmative. Count Ferns handed Hans a crystal ball, instructing him to use it to report on the situation. Hans assured him that he would handle it. After receiving the crystal ball, Hans left the room, believing that everything was proceeding according to plan and that Myers had performed admirably. He reminded himself not to fail. Once Hans had left, Count Ferns turned to a person who had been hiding behind the wall, addressed as Grandmaster Lowenson, and asked for their opinion. Grandmaster Lowenson stated that the situation seemed to align with Count Fern's interests, and appeared advantageous for him. However, they cautioned that the danger might not be immediate and advised Count Ferns to eventually verify the situation. Switching back to Manhattan and Lawrence, a knight was conversing with another knight, remarking on Lawrence's unique nature. He described Lawrence as a toxic individual, unlike anyone he had encountered before. The knight expressed astonishment at Lawrence's complete lack of mercy in his methods of torturing and disposing of criminals. Manhattan hesitantly asked if going to such extremes was necessary, to which Lawrence replied that he had promised the Archduke to eliminate those individuals. The knight, unaware that Lawrence was approaching, continued to discuss Lawrence, describing him as having the face of a devil who consumed people. As the knight attempted to inform the others about Lawrence's presence, Lawrence surprised them by speaking up. He told the other knight that he had something to report to the Archduke, and the knight allowed Lawrence to enter, informing him that the Archduke was at the training grounds. Meanwhile, Ethan was engaged in training when Lawrence approached him. Lawrence mentioned that he had a report to make, and Ethan asked if it was related to their previous conversation. Lawrence confirmed it and suggested that there were capable individuals within the 8 gates who could form a decent intelligence team if utilized. Ethan found the idea appealing and asked if they could take action immediately. Lawrence explained that around 60% of them were ready to do so. At that moment, a knight arrived, informing Ethan that someone named Hans had arrived. Ethan asked the knight to bring Hans to his office. Ethan and Lawrence then returned to Ethan's office, where Ethan reflected on the successful infiltration by Hans. At the training area of Kelmont Castle, Myers was engaged in combat training with 2 knights surrounding him. The knights launched their attacks, but Myers skillfully blocked their strikes. He countered one of the knights in front of him but missed the other, who then attacked him from above. However, Myers swiftly blocked the attack, demonstrating his skill. Count Ferns and Lowenson observed Myers' performance from the balcony. Lowenson commented that Myers showed decent ability and believed that Myers possessed the necessary qualities to become the head. Count Ferns attributed Myers' skill to the Arden bloodline and instructed Lowenson to keep this information hidden from Lugon. He also advised being cautious about the Archduke's movements and entrusted the rest to himself. Count Ferns expressed his excitement for the upcoming gathering of the families. Meanwhile, back at the Baron's mansion, Ethan held a paper containing the report of Hans regarding the results of Myers and Hans' infiltration. Ethan remarked that Myers seemed to be performing well and asked Hans about the Count's reaction. Hans informed Ethan that the Count appeared to believe them without any doubt, as their plan was executed flawlessly. Hans further mentioned that since he had been sent to the Baron, it would be much easier to gather and transmit information. Lawrence concluded that Ethan had already begun the process of dividing the collateral families. After asking about Ethan's objective, Lawrence learned that the gathering was indeed Ethan's goal. Hans, on the other hand, was puzzled about how Lawrence knew about the plan. Curious, he asked Ethan about Lawrence's identity, and Ethan introduced Lawrence and Hans to each other. Ethan emphasized that the two would be working closely together and should take the opportunity to get to know each other better. In a separate room, Hans and Lawrence found themselves in an awkward silence. Hans wondered how Ethan had already found someone like Lawrence within the short week he had been gone. He pondered if Lawrence was exceptionally intelligent, noting Lawrence's delicate face. At the same time, Lawrence observed Hans, wondering about the perverted thoughts that seemed to cross his mind, based on the expression on his face. Breaking the silence, Lawrence asked Hans if he was not fond of him. Hans quickly clarified that his hesitation was not due to any dislike but rather because he thought Lawrence was young. Lawrence brushed it off, stating that it didn't matter and that Hans only needed to assist the Archduke properly. He then handed over a report on the current situation to Hans, requesting him to review it. Hans was taken aback when he read the report, as it revealed that Baron Helmut and his 2 sons were imprisoned. This news surprised him, and he realized that Lawrence might be more capable than he initially thought. Lawrence confidently stated that the execution of Baron Helmut would take place soon. This shocked Hans, who questioned whether such drastic measures were necessary considering their royal status. Lawrence reminded Hans of the countless people who had suffered and even starved to death due to the Baron's actions. He asked Hans if he still believed the execution was too harsh and if he should start doubting Hans' loyalty. Hans realized that trusting the Baron would have been a grave mistake, considering the atrocities committed by him and his servants. Another report caught Hans' attention, detailing the swift subjugation of the 8th gates in just 1 day. Lawrence mentioned that there were other events as well and inquired about Hans' plans moving forward. Hans explained that he intended to gain the Count's trust by providing false information, allowing the youngest Duke to get closer to Count Ferns. However, Lawrence deemed this plan insufficient. He pointed out that if Hans were to return to Count Ferns in his current state, he would surely lose his life. Hans was taken aback by Lawrence's words, feeling a mix of shock and anger. Later that afternoon, Jaren visited the Archduke and introduced himself to Lawrence. Jaren expressed his anticipation to work with Lawrence and mentioned hearing a lot about him from Ethan. Lawrence tried to downplay the need for politeness, but Jaren insisted, showing respect as the Archduke's advisor. Ethan inquired about Jaren's progress, and Jaren informed him that things were going well and he had come to deliver the response to their appeal. However, it was not the news Ethan had hoped for. Ethan reassured Jaren and mentioned his intention to show gratitude to Marquis Bloten for accepting a challenging request. After reading the note, Ethan expressed frustration, discarding it and criticizing Marquis Bloten's evasive language. Lawrence remarked that the king was siding with the collateral families, which surprised Jaren. Ethan explained that the king had essentially brushed off the matter, leaving it for the houses to resolve among themselves. Lawrence viewed this as a positive development, while Jaren was taken aback by Lawrence's statement. Jaren questioned Lawrence about its meaning. Lawrence elaborated, stating that the biggest obstacles ahead were the king and the 7 families. He pointed out that the king had neglected the issue, and the Archduke had used that to their advantage by sending an appeal. Ethan concluded that the 7 families were indeed behind the 10 collateral families, and the king had forsaken them for his own benefit. However, he suggested setting aside those thoughts for now, as all the pieces of their plan had fallen into place. Ethan emphasized that the stage had been set by the king, and they needed to commence their move. Jaren expressed his desire to distribute the potion throughout the nation but acknowledged the difficulty of achieving such a large-scale operation with his Missa's merchant. Marquis Bess's house suggested utilizing their own merchant and distribution network to facilitate nationwide circulation. Jaren mentioned that their family's merchant network already had a presence across the nation, making it feasible to distribute the potions widely. Additionally, they could even consider exporting to nearby nations for significantly higher profits. Ethan didn't hesitate and immediately accepted the offer, stating that he had no reason to decline. He asked Jaren to convey his anticipation to the Marquis. Jaren assured Ethan that he would do his best. Meanwhile, Lawrence knocked on the door, interrupting their business discussion. Ethan welcomed Lawrence inside, and Lawrence informed him that the preparations were complete. Ethan apologized to Jaren, explaining that there was an important task he had to attend to. Jaren reassured Ethan not to worry and mentioned that he would provide him with the details through a document later. He then left, and Ethan and Lawrence proceeded downstairs to meet Manhattan. Jaren, left alone, contemplated how Ethan was truly an enigmatic person, wondering if Ethan had already anticipated the potion's circulation and had set his sights on the entire kingdom. He eagerly anticipated the day when Ethan would become the Duke who restored power to the Ardens. Meanwhile, Sir Manhattan, Lawrence, and Ethan were on their way somewhere when Ethan assigned Lawrence the task of handling the potion circulation case once Jaren sent the documents. Ethan asked if they had arrived at their destination, and Manhattan confirmed that they were in the solitary area where Baron Kargas was being held. Ethan inquired if the Baron had been moved for interrogation, and Lawrence confirmed this, mentioning that it seemed Baron Kargas was hiding something despite the torture. Ethan assured Manhattan that he would take care of it and asked him to hand over the key and resume his position as Grandmaster. Manhattan expressed concern, but Ethan reassured him, promising to keep his word and ensure the safety of the rest of the Baron's family. Manhattan thanked Ethan and stated that he would return to his duties. Helmut was filled with regret as he reflected on his past, realizing how foolish he had been when he was weak and had numerous enemies. Initially cautious and considered shy, his rise in power within the Senate had made him increasingly arrogant without him even realizing it. He acknowledged his mistake in underestimating the Archduke, pushing him to his limits. Helmut had failed to recognize Ethan's true power. When Ethan opened the cell, Helmut was surprised to see the Archduke but became terrified at the sight of Lawrence, remembering the torture he had endured. He hastily retreated, warning them not to come closer and claiming that he had already revealed all the information he had. Ethan saw through Helmut's act and expressed disbelief that Helmut was still withholding information in his current state, likely thinking that Ethan couldn't do anything to him if he remained ignorant. Helmut denied Ethan's accusation, but Ethan threw him a piece of paper, revealing that Helmut was stalling for reinforcements. As Helmut read the letter, bearing the seal of the royal household, his body trembled. He realized that the king had abandoned him and instructed him to resolve the matter within the household on his own. Ethan confronted Helmut, questioning whether he now understood the gravity of his situation. Overwhelmed with despair, the Baron pleaded for mercy and promised to divulge everything he knew. Ethan informed him that the fate of Helmut and his sons would depend on his cooperation. Helmut, on his knees and in tears, confessed that there was a hidden 4th floor in the basement where he had concealed various secret items, including a memento of the former Duke. Ethan's anger flared when he learned that the Baron had taken his father's memento. Helmut assured him that it was not the god blade, stating that someone like him could never possess such a powerful weapon. However, he revealed that the god blade, known as Dranian, was completely broken. This revelation left Ethan shocked and disbelieving. The God Blade was a legendary weapon capable of cutting through anything and withstanding extreme heat. It had been a symbol of the Arden family, passed down through generations. In Ethan's previous life, he had fought his final battle with the God Blade, even though he ultimately lost. The fact that the God Blade was now completely broken astonished him. Ethan implored Helmut to provide him with all the details regarding the God Blade. Helmut proceeded to recount the events that occurred approximately 15 years ago when the Wyvernians suddenly invaded from the Hydern Empire, catching the unprepared nation off guard and causing it to collapse rapidly. In response, the Arden family assembled a death-defying squad composed of their most skilled members. This squad demonstrated exceptional talent, surpassing even the elite knights, and engaged in a direct confrontation with the Dragon King. However, upon their return, all that remained of the God Blade was its hilt alongside the corpses of the squad. Hearing Helmut's account, Ethan realized that his father had valiantly fought the Dragon King and perished in the process. Curious about the fate of the Dragon King, Ethan inquired further. Helmut admitted uncertainty as information was scarce, but he had heard that tracking the Dragon King had proven difficult following the demise of the death-defying squad. Ethan speculated that if the Dragon King was in hiding, it likely meant he had sustained critical injuries during their battle. Reflecting on the non-aggression pact, Ethan questioned why it had been established, considering the absence of the Dragon King, which presented an opportunity to eradicate the dragons. Helmut was taken aback by Ethan's question, as all these events had occurred prior to Ethan falling into a coma. Helmut even wondered if Ethan had lost his memories as well. Ethan, filled with urgency, demanded a response from Helmut. Eventually, Helmut revealed that the genuine empire had led the formation of the pact and had exerted pressure on neighboring empires to sign it. Ethan was surprised by this revelation. As Ethan insisted on receiving a detailed explanation, Helmut elaborated that after the battle, the Dragon King had disappeared, but his formidable grandmasters and fierce army remained strong. Consequently, the course of the conflict did not change. Subsequently, one of the envoys had made contact with the Empire, leading to a truce between the strongest empire in the West and the Wyvernians. Following this, other empires followed suit and agreed to the truce. Reflecting on the information, Ethan and Lawrence made their way to the secret passage mentioned by Helmut. Along the way, Ethan contemplated the Empire and concluded that it was not as weak as he had initially thought. He also acknowledged that their current situation was better than in his previous life. Determined to investigate the Empire further, he postponed his inquiries for later. Upon reaching their destination, a large door secured by a magical seal stood before them. Ethan commended the efforts to protect the place and instructed Lawrence to open the door. Lawrence placed the artifact in the center of the magic seal, and as the door began to open, Ethan gained a notion of what his father's memento might be. Entering the room, they discovered that it was much larger than anticipated. Lawrence remarked on the abundance of items, which could make it challenging to locate the specific item Ethan sought. However, to their surprise, Ethan easily found his father's memento. Ethan informed Lawrence that the collateral families were unaware of the true nature of the item he had found. It was actually the 8 ring, another heirloom passed down alongside the God Blade. Lawrence commented that it didn't resemble a ring, and Ethan explained that its name was not based on its shape. Using the black flame's breath on the slime-like object, red-colored mana began to flow on Ethan's body. The slime-like object dispersed, and Ethan stood still as something entered his body, emitting an immense amount of energy. Lawrence, concerned and uncertain about what was happening, watched over Ethan. After absorbing the treasure, Ethan remarked that it wasn't bad. Lawrence inquired about what had just occurred, and Ethan clarified that the 8 ring was meant to be assimilated into one's body. Its origins were unknown, but it was a cherished treasure that had been in the possession of the Arden family since its inception. Only individuals with a significant amount of Arden blood could utilize its power. To those unfamiliar with the Arden family's breathing technique, the family vision, it might appear as mere trash. Curious, Lawrence asked if the 8 ring possessed special abilities. Ethan confirmed this and cautioned Lawrence to maintain a safe distance, as he was about to demonstrate the potentially hazardous power of the 8 ring. Ethan initiated the process by channeling his mana into the 8 rings positioned across his body, allowing them to absorb the mana. He remarked that it had been a while since he had experienced the same sensation. Choosing to release the stored mana in the ring all at once, an overwhelming surge of mana enveloped him. Lawrence, astonished by what he witnessed, questioned if Ethan had released his mana in a single burst. Ethan confirmed this, explaining that the ring stored mana and enhanced it, granting explosive strength. He suggested that with this newfound power, reclaiming the Duke's land would be easier, reminding Lawrence to factor it into his plans. Before leaving, Ethan instructed Lawrence to gather detailed information on the locations of the remaining pieces of the 8 ring. Lawrence assured him that he would take care of it. Ethan, reflecting on the collateral's refusal to honor his father's sacrifice and their greed-driven seizure of the Duke's possessions, resolved to personally confront those who had tarnished the honor of the Arden family. The following morning, Ethan was in his office when Lawrence informed him that 5 of the remaining 8 ring pieces had left their territory. Each of the 4 out of 7 collateral families' chiefs had received 1 piece, while the remaining piece was in the Rimdell Kingdom. Ethan asked Lawrence if he was certain about this information, and Lawrence affirmed that it was accurate, gathered through interactions with a collateral family member. Ethan acknowledged that there was no reason for the collaterals to lie at this point, but found it troublesome and acknowledged the difficulty of locating all the pieces within a short time frame. Nevertheless, Ethan concluded that it didn't matter and that they would need to oppose the collaterals to retrieve Tarin regardless. He resolved to proceed with the plan and deal with the situation later. Ethan ordered Lawrence to prepare for an attack, as they would reclaim the piece of the 8 ring right before them. A rumor began to circulate among the populace, spreading quickly, about a descendant of a war hero who had risen again to fight for the people. The people were hopeful that after 10 years of tyranny, a new hope had emerged. Somewhere in the port city, the stage where the Baron and his son were to be executed was heavily guarded and surrounded by angry civilians. A man suddenly shouted that the Baron and his sons were approaching, and the enraged citizens cried out for their execution, most of them being victims of the Baron's tyranny. Amidst the commotion, a knight announced the arrival of the Archduke, and the crowd fell silent as Ethan passed through them. The people admired Ethan, recognizing him as the one who had defeated the Baron. Ethan stood before his citizens and urged them to listen. He informed them that Baron Kargas had violated the vassal contract, perpetuating violence and illegal activities. Many friends and family members had suffered injuries or lost their lives because of the Baron's actions. Therefore, as the most capable member of the Arden family, Ethan vowed to restore order and justice by confiscating the Baron's titles and properties, executing him and his 2 sons in accordance with the family's laws. The crowd praised Ethan, and after his speech, the Baron and his sons were executed at the Arden family hunting mansion. Meanwhile, Lawrence visited the Grand Duchess and informed her that Ethan had taken control of Baron Kargas as soon as he arrived in port. He explained that Ethan was currently assisting the city in restoring order. The Grand Duchess expressed her concern, stating that since Ethan had executed a member of the Senate, the 9 families might become involved. Lawrence reassured her, assuring her that everything was within the Archduke's calculations. The Grand Duchess then asked Lawrence to tell her the rest of the story along the way. Lawrence agreed to share the information and inquired about the knight standing next to her. The knight apologized for the delay in introducing himself, explaining that the urgency of the situation had caused the oversight. He introduced himself as Paulton, the Grand Duchess's knight escort. Lawrence realized that Paulton was the symbol of alliance from the Bessus family, the knight the Archduke had mentioned. They were en route to port, and Lawrence mentioned that the strategy involved leveraging the split within the collaterals to ensure Ethan's safety. Grateful for Lawrence's response, the Grand Duchess thanked him and expressed her frustration at the lack of reliable sources to inquire about the current state of the family until now. The Grand Duchess acknowledged that she had asked many questions but praised Lawrence for not only being knowledgeable but also kind. She expressed her gratitude, holding Lawrence's hands and considering him like a cute younger sibling. She encouraged them to see each other more often and grow closer. Lawrence was taken aback by the Duchess's behavior, marveling at how someone so beautiful and important could act so freely. After a few hours of travel, they arrived at the palace where Ethan was located. Ethan warmly welcomed them, and the Grand Duchess commented on the palace's impressive size. A knight approached Ethan and greeted him, revealing that he had heard a lot about Ethan from the family head, Jaren. He introduced himself as the escort knight sent by Marquis Bessus, Paulton. Ethan reciprocated the greeting and shook hands with Paulton. During their handshake, Paulton discreetly used a mana wave, but Ethan noticed and inferred that the knight was inspecting him. Ethan was impressed by Paulton's skill in concealing the movement of mana, a technique most knights wouldn't have detected. In response, Ethan released his own mana wave into Paulton's body, alerting the knight. Paulton commented that judging by Ethan's level, he appeared to be around a 6-star knight, indicating that Marquis Bessus held genuine concern for the situation. Ethan instructed Lawrence to accompany Paulton to his room. Paulton found it strange that despite the amount of mana Ethan possessed, he appeared to be only a 2-star knight. He wondered how a 2-star knight could scatter his mana in such a manner. The Grand Duchess inquired if there was any news from Myers, to which Ethan mentioned receiving a letter from his brother. Ethan then guided his sister to her room, and she expressed disbelief at the beauty and luxury of her accommodations. She questioned whether she could truly use such expensive items. Ethan assured her that as a Grand Duchess of the Arden family, she deserved to live in such luxury. He proposed the idea of taking administrative lessons from an official and asked if she was interested. He emphasized that she could decline if she didn't want to. The Grand Duchess, considering herself Ethan's sister, felt it was her duty to help him and expressed her willingness to learn and be of assistance. Ethan thanked her before leaving and informed her that someone other than Sir Paulton would be escorting her until dinner. Ethan contemplated that if Paulton were a 6-star knight, they would easily accomplish their goals. He reasoned that Count Chaman and Lugon's nonchalant attitude stemmed from having several 6-star knights on their side. Recognizing his own lack of power compared to them, Ethan acknowledged that it had only been a month since training began and he wasn't yet prepared to face them. Ethan knocked on Paulton's door and asked for a moment of his time. Paulton, still unpacking, invited Ethan inside. After they sat down, Paulton immediately questioned the reason for Ethan's visit. Ethan explained that he wanted to propose a test of their skills. Despite Paulton's earlier rudeness at the gate, Ethan believed it was acceptable to make such a proposal. Paulton inwardly acknowledged that Ethan had indeed noticed his actions at the gate and wore an awkward expression. He asked Ethan for further details about the proposed test. After completing her studies, the Grand Duchess remarked that it was almost dinner time and how quickly time had passed while studying. Her escort knight, Willie, agreed, mentioning that the sun was already setting. The Grand Duchess extended an invitation for Sir Willie to join the family for dinner, stating that even if it was just for one day, he was still her escort knight. Sir Willie asked if it was acceptable, and the Grand Duchess affirmed that it was. Willie expressed his honor but also felt sorry for Sir Paulton, explaining to the Grand Duchess that Ethan and Paulton should be in the midst of a sparring match at that time. Concerned for her brother Ethan and Sir Paulton, the Grand Duchess was surprised and worried. Meanwhile, Ethan and Paulton were engaged in a sparring session at the training grounds. Ethan launched an attack against Paulton, but it was effectively blocked. Ethan anticipated that Paulton would easily defend against his attack and believed that Paulton would be fine even if he intensified his assault. Paulton recognized the immense strength behind Ethan's attack. Ethan decided to increase the tempo and charged at Paulton. Paulton prepared himself for Ethan's incoming strike, knowing that if he held back any further, he would lose the match. Paulton skillfully evaded Ethan's attack, disappearing from his sight. Ethan, however, predicted Paulton's move and realized that he was behind him. Paulton launched an attack from behind, but Ethan was prepared and successfully blocked him. The two clashed once more, and Paulton struggled to understand Ethan's abilities. He observed that the Archduke was seemingly using mana even after having his mana capacity shattered, which Paulton believed was impossible for an ordinary person. He was particularly curious about how Ethan could surpass his own mana capacity. Normally, a knight's strength and speed are determined by their mana capacity, and knights are ranked accordingly. However, Ethan's unique abilities perplexed Paulton. Unbeknownst to Paulton, the shattered mana pieces within Ethan's body had been infused with fire essence, allowing each piece to function as a mana whole. Instead of channeling and releasing mana from the stomach like most knights, Ethan could distribute concentrated mana throughout his body more efficiently and rapidly. Paulton launched a forceful attack that pushed Ethan back and caused him to fall to his knees. Ethan anticipated that fighting against a 6-star knight would be challenging. Paulton praised Ethan for his incredible resilience, considering his mana capacity. Ethan reminisced about his past obsession with learning swordsmanship and acknowledged that sparring with a high-ranked knight brought back memories. Deciding to take the fight seriously, Ethan unleashed the power of the 8 rings, causing his mana to overflow. Paulton was astonished by the sudden increase in Ethan's mana capacity. Ethan swiftly rushed forward and launched a fierce attack. Paulton retaliated by releasing his own mana. The two engaged in a fast-paced battle, leaving the onlooking knights, including Menharton, in awe of their skills. Menharton pondered the astonishing talent displayed by Ethan and wondered about the extent of his abilities. In their final clash, Paulton overwhelmed Ethan, causing him to lose his sword and admit defeat. He conveyed to Paulton that he couldn't find a way to surpass him and acknowledged it as a good duel. Paulton noticed a significant increase in Ethan's strength and speed during the spar and questioned if Ethan had held back at the beginning. Ethan clarified that he hadn't held back and explained that it was a skill unique to the Arden family. Impressed, Paulton praised the incredible techniques of the Duke family. Ethan mentioned that if Paulton had truly given his all, Ethan wouldn't have had the opportunity to use his unique skill. He expressed his enjoyment of the spar and thanked Paulton for his time. In response, Paulton humbly expressed his gratitude to Ethan. Internally, Paulton realized that it had been a complete miscalculation on his part. He had wanted to test his skills against the rumored Archduke, but he never expected Ethan to be so skilled. Despite reaching the level of a 6-star knight 5 years ago, Paulton had been unable to progress further. He believed that given a year, he would lose to Ethan. He concluded that Ethan lacked the time to accumulate his mana. Paulton called out to Ethan, expressing that he had learned a lot from him, and asked if they could spar again in the future. Ethan found Paulton interesting for not succumbing to his own ego and his desire to learn more. He assured Paulton that they could spar anytime. Paulton felt that he had gained new insights from Ethan's blade, and they shook hands. Suddenly, the Grand Duchess arrived at the training grounds, visibly angry. She scolded Ethan, accusing him of being too extreme and not allowing Paulton, who had traveled a long way, to rest. Ethan, with a troubled expression, denied the accusation, stating that it wasn't like that. Marquis Bessus communicated with Paulton using a magic sphere. Marquis Bessus inquired whether Ethan was as skilled as Paulton had described. Paulton confirmed Ethan's exceptional talent and remarked that Ethan's potential exceeded his expectations. Marquis Bessus found it difficult to believe that Ethan possessed such remarkable talent. He instructed Paulton to report every detail, no matter how small, about the Archduke's actions. Paulton assured Marquis Bessus that he understood and would provide a report on the next scheduled date. After the conversation with Paulton, Marquis Bessus contemplated the fact that Ethan, despite being in a coma for a prolonged period and having his mana whole shattered, could still hold his own against a 6-star knight. This surprised the Marquis. He considered Ethan's resourcefulness impressive, but his martial arts talent surpassed that. Anticipating Ethan's future actions, Marquis Bessus couldn't remain idle. He summoned his butler and gave him a list of items to purchase, instructing him to procure them promptly and send them to Paulton along with a letter. The butler acknowledged the instructions. Marquis Bessus was convinced that Ethan would bring about significant change in the Hydern Kingdom. He saw it as a perfect opportunity for both families to strengthen their alliance. Meanwhile, at night in a town, a building caught fire where prisoners held by the rascals from the 8 Gates of Darkness had escaped. Some knights were working to extinguish the fire while others pursued the escapees. Hans, having narrowly escaped and now hiding in the bushes, wondered where he could go. Suddenly, someone grabbed him and covered his mouth. The man identified himself as a knight from the Count's family and explained that he was there to escort Hans to a safe location. As they made their way, Hans pondered how everything seemed to be going according to Lawrence's plan. Sometime before the fire broke out, Hans and Lawrence were in a room discussing their plan. Hans questioned the necessity of going to such lengths, and Lawrence explained that it was the only way to dispel the Count's suspicion. Lawrence emphasized that Count Ferns was merciless, citing his betrayal of longtime ally Baron Kargas. Lawrence believed that gaining the Count's trust would be a difficult task. Hans expressed concern about how long he would remain in the cell. But Lawrence assured him that the preparations were complete and chaos would soon erupt with the escape of the 8 Gates members. They planned to use the ensuing chaos to facilitate Hans' escape, with one of the pursuers appearing before him. In the present time, Hans and the Count's knight were running toward a safe location. The knight guided Hans to the basement, assuring him of his safety. As they entered, the knight immediately inquired about what had happened to Hans. Hans explained that Ethan had detained and tortured him, leading the knight to believe that there was animosity between Ethan and Hans. Concerned about Hans' wounds, the knight suggested immediate treatment. But Hans insisted that he was fine and requested that the knight contact the Count first, as he had important information. Hans mentioned that his sphere had been confiscated during his capture, emphasizing its significance to the current situation. The knight understood and promised to contact the Count promptly. The next morning, Lawrence was in Ethan's office giving him a report. He informed Ethan that Hans had successfully made contact with the Count's family as planned. Ethan expressed satisfaction, noting that the Count should be taking their plan more seriously now. Ethan then inquired about the administration, and Lawrence replied that they were recruiting individuals who had been expelled from the Duke's family as per their plan. Curious, Lawrence asked Ethan about the contents of the letter he had been reading. Ethan revealed that it was a personal letter from Marquis Bessus, stating that Paulton had reported about Ethan to him. Lawrence questioned if there was anything significant in the letter, and Ethan confirmed that there was. Marquis Bessus had mentioned offering a gift to expedite their plan and strengthen their alliance. Lawrence pondered what the gift could be, and Ethan speculated that it might be an elixir. Ethan explained that an elixir is created by processing rare ingredients highly concentrated with mana absorbed from the air. Consuming elixirs allows people to replenish their mana reserves. Ethan believed that if he could increase his mana quickly using an elixir, his fire-based mana would burn even hotter and brighter. He desired the strength and intensity he had achieved in his past life. The heat concentrated in his blade back then was incomparable, capable of melting a regular steel blade. Ethan intended to acquire an item that could withstand his heightened power after consuming an elixir. He assured Lawrence that he would return with a new blade. Ethan informed Lawrence that he would be away for a while until the Marquis gift arrived. Menharton and 3 other knights would be guarding Lawrence in his absence. Lawrence asked Ethan where he was going, and Ethan revealed that he needed to obtain the necessary item. He planned to take care of things while he was away. At Ardenduke's capital, Londinium, Count Lugon of the Emilton faction was furious and confronted Count Ferns about the Archduke's indifference towards a servant's death. Count Ferns tried to calm Count Lugon down, emphasizing the consequences of assassinating the Archduke. He warned that such an act would lead to the king and the 7 families holding them responsible, endangering not just their titles but their lives as well. Count Lugon acknowledged this risk but believed that the blame would primarily fall on Count Ferns. He believed that it was evident why the Archduke had attacked Kargas. He had discovered Count Ferns' underhanded tactics. Count Lugon saw an opportunity to further fuel the conflict and instigate a feud between Count Ferns and the Archduke, hoping they would go after each other. Unbeknownst to Count Lugon, Count Ferns was aware of his intentions. Count Ferns had already set his own plan in motion, targeting Count Lugon. Prior to their meeting, Hans had contacted Count Ferns and informed him of Ethan's inquiries about Count Ferns during his torture. Taking advantage of the situation, Hans deliberately provided Ethan with incorrect information about the faction, deceiving him. Count Ferns was delighted to receive this report from Hans and commended him for his outstanding work. He concealed his devious plan from Count Lugon, relishing the thought of manipulating the situation to his advantage. Count Ferns then reassured Hans that he trusted him. Meanwhile, Ethan was riding a horse towards a small village rumored to have a dungeon. His main priority was obtaining a special metal that could only be found in that dungeon, although he also desired the mana stones and other treasures within. As Ethan approached the village, he encountered a guard who informed him that entry was currently restricted. The guard requested Ethan to state his purpose in the village. Ethan presented the symbol of the Arden family, stating that he was not a suspicious person. However, the younger guard was unfamiliar with the symbol and insisted that even with an identity card, they could not allow entry. Fortunately, the older guard recognized the Arden family symbol to some extent and asked Ethan if he was the Archduke. Ethan confirmed his identity, and upon learning this, the guards immediately opened the gate. The older guard accompanied Ethan and noted the strange atmosphere in the town. The streets were devoid of activity, and the townspeople appeared nervous and fearful, but not towards Ethan. Curious about the situation, Ethan inquired about the whereabouts of the village chief to the guard escorting him. The guard explained that the patrol guard had gone to find the chief, and they would be arriving shortly. Ethan decided to personally meet the village chief and requested the guard to guide him. After an hour, Ethan arrived at the village chief's location. Chief Gillian recounted a story about a hunter's experience near an abandoned mine. The hunter had heard strange noises resembling pickaxes coming from inside the mine and had seen dozens of skeletons using pickaxes. Gillian confirmed that the hunter was too scared to investigate further but believed that it was indeed skeletons making the noise. Ethan considered the possibility that someone was after the metal called aphelion in the abandoned mine. Aphelion, a mineral with a strong affinity for mana, was not as strong as mithril but harder than steel. Ethan pondered the fact that aphelion was not expected to be discovered for a few more years, making it intriguing that someone else was interested in it. Gillian questioned the guard about the skeleton's purpose in the abandoned mine, but the guard was unaware. Ethan suspected that if someone had control over a large number of skeletons, a powerful dark magician, known as a Lick, might be involved. Confronting a Lick and their undead army with his current power would pose a significant challenge. Ethan realized that he might have to abandon the pursuit of aphelion if he was unable to overcome the Lick's forces. Suddenly, Ethan stood up and expressed his intention to immediately investigate the mines and inquire about the mine's location. Arriving near the forest where the mine was located, Ethan spotted the mine entrance. Although it appeared small, he could hear mining sounds coming from inside. Surprisingly, there were no guards present, indicating the miners' confidence in their abilities. As Ethan explored the mine, he recalled that the village chief had reported the undead activity to Baron Kargas, but he had not come across any documents regarding the matter. Ethan considered the possibility that Baron Kargas intentionally concealed or denied the problem of the undead presence, even though there could be a Lick on his land. Realizing that the skeletons were indeed mining aphelion, Ethan reached the end of the tunnel and noticed an individual emitting unique energy, the dark magician controlling the skeletons. Relieved that it wasn't a Lick-level threat, Ethan startled the dark magician. Determined to claim the aphelion for himself, Ethan engaged in a confrontation with the dark magician, who threatened to turn him into a skeleton. In response, Ethan prepared his own stance and questioned the dark magician about where he had learned the Wyverian breathing technique. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. Well guys, if you like this video and you want a second part, comment below with the word part 2. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.